Hi, my name is Shirley Ann Rowley. This is my video introduction to support my application to attend Artlands 2023.
Yuridu, Marung, Artlands peoples.
Hi, it's Shelley Pisani here, coming to you from a very sunny Bundaberg.
My name's Anzara Clark.
My name's David Spry.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nasser Palangi.
I am an extremely passionate advocate for the regional arts.
I want to talk about strategic partnerships.
Our brilliant regional communities and also contributing.
Space for unheard voices.
Working collaboratively across the country.
The opportunity to work with and
the problems to those solutions should be shared widely.
What needs to be done to sort of retain and attract arts talent to regional areas.
And have heaps of energy left and lots of excitement about what is the future for this amazing sector.
I'm really looking forward to this opportunity of potentially going to Artlands this year. I have absolutely considered myself a lifelong learner. I'm always looking for ways to be better in running.
Emerge through the open door, crack it open. Change is in store. Voices heard in uncomfortable places. Create the spaces in the weaving.
You can stay in your little town and you can become parochially entrenched and not see the bigger picture. And so I love to go to opportunities like Artlands to put on a different pair of glasses and see the world in a different way. It's wonderful.
I felt a little bit apprehensive because I didn't know what to expect. I was just excited about being there to share a young person's perspective. I felt like this might not be the kind of event that a lot of people my age would be interested in attending. And then, like I said, the passion behind wanting other people to have the opportunity to explore the arts industry. I don't know. I think I was excited to share that perspective.
Yeah, I was getting curious where that national conversation was at, what other regions are doing, and potentially like what others are doing that's working, what are we doing that's working that could possibly be shared. My name's Warwick Gow. I work as an artist, primarily a photographer, installation artist, also one of the co-founders and runners of Lantana Space, and I work in creative development for regional council. I'm pretty heavily engaged in sort of the sector locally here and kind of invested in it growing and building and succeeding, somewhat selfishly because I like living here and I like going to things here.
I'm the Artistic Director of Southern Forest Arts. It's a small organisation based in an even smaller town in the southwest of WA. I've been in this position for 18 years, so a long time, and I think I'll be here for a long time still to come. And once upon a time, I was a practising artist, and now not so much the practising artist, but very passionate about arts practice.
My name's Kiarnna. I'm a 22-year-old, well, almost 22, turning 22 this Saturday. I'm a musician in northern Tasmania, and I've been a soul trading musician since, I believe, the early 2022. And yeah, that's been my full-time gig since then. Yeah, I feel extremely lucky because I feel like I grew up with the kind of narrative that arts is not something you can do full-time. I took the risk and was able to squash that myth pretty quickly because after 3 months of trying to build that business, I was booked out, so...
My wife and I just wanted to get out of the city, and a job came up in Bathurst at the entertainment centre as operations manager, which I got. A year after I became the manager, and 21 years later, here we are. So I'm no longer manager of BMAC, but I'm working on a dream project, which is to create a performing arts residency facility 18k out of town called Nurang, which is a Wiradjuri word for camp, home, place, nest.
Having been to many different Artlands, I guess I had a little bit of a preconceived idea of what it might be. But having been to Artlands that have been programmed by Ros before, I knew not to have those preconceived notions, to put them aside and be open to a new way of experiencing a national conference. And she didn't fail to surprise me. And so I think there's always that tantalising opportunity for something new, that regional arts has been constantly pursuing, not novelty for novelty's sake, but trying to peel back the layers of what is possible and get to more of a holistic approach to conferences. So that probably was the kernel that intrigued me.
So I'm Ros Abercrombie, the Executive Director of Regional Arts Australia. I've been at Regional Arts Australia since 2019, but prior to that was the Director of Artlands Victoria, so Artlands 2018. 23 was really important in being 80 years, and our founder, Dorothy Helmridge, founded the organisation in 1943, and she envisaged a nation where people living regional and remote could contribute, participate and experience arts in the same level, in the same way as those in metro. But it was very much about arts being taken to the regions. And the big change of that has been seeing, certainly over the last couple of decades, a massive shift in creatives and artists and practitioners working in their place of choice, where they live, where they study, where they produce, and actually making work to that place and being able to sort of demonstrate and show and exhibit that work to place. And that's been a really big shift. So initially, a lot of the reading and thinking I did was actually looking at the past 10 Artlands, so 20 years worth of Artlands reports and evaluations, and what people enjoyed and that they enjoyed together, what they enjoyed in their sharing, but also some of the challenges around equity of access to Artlands. But there was also a lot of thinking in looking at leadership programs and leadership models and models of different models of conferences that we did. Particularly looking at the work, and there's a book called Art of Gathering, like how we meet and why it matters, and it talks about event design and how you gather people in a curated way, in an intentional way, and I think the word is like how you defend that promise of the gathering of why people are there and what you're going to offer, and then where you're going to go with them through that journey. One of the things about it being 80 years and aligning with 80 years was it gave us the opportunity to go, let's try something new for this 80 year, which was sort of a license to facilitate change. The new model was developed alongside. So we didn't just go, okay, oh, surprise, here's the new model. I think part of it was that it was a sort of very slow process of change, and we communicated that change every step of the way. So obviously there was an internal conversation with the internal team, the close team. There was a broader conversation with the Regional Arts Network, which was our Regional Programme Administrators Network, who traditionally have been very involved in Artlands. There was also a really robust conversation with the Regional Arts Australia board around, Artlands is always and still is a high-risk, high-profile event for a board to support. We talked with the Office of the Arts, we talked with at that time the Australia Council for the Arts, and we started to sort of float ideas of ways that we were thinking about changing. And overwhelmingly, there was an excitement and a positivity. There was generally a sort of slightly wry smile saying, are you crazy? Do you not just want to do things as normal? It would be a whole lot more, simpler. And there's no two ways about it. Change is harder. But we were really conscious that as an organisation, we pride ourselves on listening to what our colleagues and what the sector were saying, and they were saying they felt that it was time for change, and so we wanted to sort of explore that further. Once we worked through the design process and we got to a point where we were like, we're going to only have 80 participants, and we fixed that figure in line with 80 years. So 80 years of Regional Australia, 80 purposely selected participants looking at the next 80 years. When we knew that there was probably going to be quite a few people that weren't the 80 that we would also want to include, and it wasn't about an exclusion strategy, it was about an inclusion strategy. So the sort of cyclical nature of the design process, from the calling EOIs, and the EOIs had two sort of strands to them. You could apply to attend the gathering in person, but you could also apply with your idea or your theme or something that you wanted to make sure was in the room. So it meant that you were effectively bringing, well, we had over 230 EOIs, so you're bringing in another 100 and however many that is, participants' voices into that space. And the same with like each stage of the co-design process informed the next. So, and firstly with the EOI process, the calling for ideas, the ideas were then distilled and then forms the conversations around the industry roundtables. So we held, I think it was 3 roundtables that people could just apply to. So that process then informs then the facilitation model for the 3 days that we were in Canberra. So it is a little unusual to have a co-facilitation team and not have one lead facilitator, or not have one organisation engaged as the facilitating organisation and then they bring in their team. Like, it is a very different model, and it definitely comes with its challenges, but it also comes with its richness. Kath Melbourne was involved all the way through in that she worked with us with the roundtables and then was bringing that into Canberra. Bryce Ives is very connected with youth practice and regional practice, and he brought a very different energy, very different focus to the facilitation style, and wanted to have a very different way of working. And then Desna, again, has been involved with RAA over the years. So again, it was none of the core facilitation team came in unknown. Like, we had a relationship with them, and that was really important. And they knew our organisation and they knew how we worked, but they also had an interest in what we were trying to do and how to support that and how to do that. What was really interesting in that process, and I would say an absolute learning on my part, and still a learning as I reflect on this, was how you work with 3 different facilitators cross-culturally, cross-practice, very different sense of time and pace and process, and how you then bring them into a program that is effectively delivered as a whole.
So I'm the coordinator of the First Nations Knowledge Circle for Regional Arts Australia, and my role is just to keep it all together and help and work with Ros and be that conduit between the group and our Regional Arts Australia. So we work very closely to make sure that everybody felt safe and that their voices were heard within that space, and it happened. People were allowed, they were heard, and they spoke up when they had something to say, and I think that was really important. I think what Ros and RAA did there was important, and it was something that was needed.
The fact that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were invited as the Knowledge Circle to attend this event provided key Indigenous engagement at all touch points of the conference's delivery, whether it came from producing the in-house of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations, if you will, Knowledge Circle, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participants and members of the Artland Conference with our non-Indigenous allies.
We didn't sit there as a group, we mixed up with the other participants. So we were there as you know, if people had questions around anything First Nations or what we were doing in our practice in the arts, we were there to have those discussions with them, and that happened quite a lot. So from a practical point of view, we were very involved in speaking with people and being a part of the learning cycle as well.
I had quite a lot of chats with the Knowledge Circle, some of the people I knew, some I didn't. So I really liked the way that those things come together. And so this idea of wisdom banks who aren't necessarily on a board, but that you can draw on their knowledge, we've implemented in our organisation as one of those sort of tangible outcomes of something that's changed.
The Knowledge Circle, that being such a central part of the process. It wasn't just acknowledging First Nations culture, it was actually placing that understanding right at the centre of the event.
My experiences in conferences around the world so far is that I've seen that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander or world Indigenous cultures are something that is tacked on. What was so unique about the 2023 Artland Conference is that it was just co-designed by Indigenous peoples and with Indigenous peoples.
But one of the things I think that was fascinating from a co-design facilitator, co-design process was what came from that and what challenges there were. And it became apparent only a couple of weeks prior to the event where Felicity Chapman, who was one of our support facilitators, and Desna had a conversation, and they basically called me up and said, we need healers at the event. And I honestly had no idea what they meant. I literally left the conversation thinking naively that they meant we need to have people there in a room to be booked into sessions to have a treatment. I didn't understand the notion of First Nation or Indigenous notion of holding space and how space is held in an inclusive way around trauma practice, healing practice and those sort of things. And I'm so grateful that Desna brought Shalita and Takara into the mix and that Felicity then came on board in her mental health first aid and in her weaving side of things. And both of those elements were intrinsically invaluable to the process. It's an Indigenous way of thinking. It's like how you acknowledge that relationship and how you respect with empathy the way that people and place show up to conversation, and that the Indigenous, from an Indigenous perspective, the potential of past and cultural trauma, the ancestral past and present future, and how that's acknowledged contextually and guided by the ethics of care.
The most tangible experience I've ever had of actually going to a big gathering where the act of care for those present was so evidently considered. And for myself, moving into sort of leadership roles around bringing people together, it was just a humbling and educational experience to see how it had been put together.
And it wasn't until the event that I was beginning to understand the interwoven nature of what they meant, how breathwork was connecting to practice, how people and place show up, how they're connected to an event. The other thing that became really apparent was that cultural protocol and cultural practice was interwoven across the whole 3 days. And of course there's an acknowledgement and a welcome to country, but it's not bookended. And it was really a learning of that cultural protocol and cultural practice interwoven across, throughout and within, and not being bookended, alongside starting to see and starting to learn and listen to the importance of the ethics of care and what that actually means, and then how that is embedded into practice. And so I think there's obviously so much more we as an organisation can learn from that, but I think as a starting base, just learning to trust those cultural protocols and that cultural practice, and giving space for that cultural protocol and cultural practice, and not needing to know what that is going to look like and where that's going to go, is really, really important for us as an organisation, and probably for gatherings in general.
I hadn't really been in that environment since being in school, the idea of group discussions. And so I think the initial day when we started doing that, I felt quite out of my depth, out of my comfort zone. And I felt a little bit quiet, but I was lucky enough to be in a group with some beautiful older women that actually were asking me questions and asking for my opinions. And that felt pretty awesome, to be invited and kind of being asked to have a seat at that table to speak as a young person. So I'm very grateful for those women. It really opened my mind to just how broad the arts industry is, not just in Australia, but in the world, I guess. To meet people like council workers, not just creatives, not just the painters and the writers and the musicians. I was actually meeting people that are the incredible people behind actually making events happen and things like that. And it was just, I met so many beautiful people, and I think that was probably one of the most special parts.
Yeah, there were so many dots that were connected across tables, and then people would move to another table. And so really, you felt connected to everyone in the room. I don't think I've had that experience at a conference, and I'm not saying Artlands was a conference, but you normally feel that those are the known people, the ones that are talking at you, and you're just a sea of people. You sort of connect in the informal moments. You do the networking over tea and coffee, but often then you even talk to people that you already know. One thing I didn't expect when I got there was how many metropolitan people were involved. And at first I was a little bit shocked by that. It only took a minute and I could understand, of course, it's all about exchange, and it's about involving everybody and everybody understanding what is special about regional arts practice. So it was great having all of those people involved as well.
Yeah, I think there was probably a lot more enthusiasm than I was maybe expecting. Like, artists can be known for whinging and complaining and saying that the government doesn't do this or so-and-so doesn't fund that. But for the most part, like, everyone was just sharing like, oh, this is what we do and how we do it and this is what works. And like, we kind of just need room to keep doing that. Like, it's actually like acknowledging that what a lot of the work that those people, everyone in that room is already doing, it's already working. It just kind of needs like a bit more space and a bit more support to keep working. Like, people like from their place know how to connect and build that stuff better than anybody else. And I think that was a really positive thing to hear, is like, people are just doing it, and like, they might have their little gripes and can always want more money or space, but a lot of people are showing up in a big way to do the work and continue to do so, and show up at Canberra for 3 days on somewhat of a whim.
And I just really valued the fact that it wasn't all cerebral. The format had so many opportunities for me to be in my body, which I think is just, fundamentally important when you bring a group of people together, and you want them to share and bring forth these little pearls of wisdom. Well, then they need to be wholly engaged, not just here. It's got to come from here and the gut. All of those have to be aligned. But I had conversations, one that comes to mind, with a young girl who's so concerned that she couldn't have children. She wanted to have children but didn't feel she could have children because she had this despair. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling this one all over me. This despair about the future. And I hadn't known how badly that was affecting young people until I'd had that conversation with her. And in one of the group sessions we had a wonderful Aboriginal elder who was consoling her, and just the dialogue between them was beautiful, from such different places, from such different generations and life experiences. But I felt privileged to be part of a conversation like that. So we had this wonderful container of safety, and it was a progression. We always knew that there was this progressive element to the day 3, that it had been layered up, that there was this day was going to lead to this thing, was going to lead to this thing. And so there was this building momentum, like a good story, not necessarily a thriller, but we knew that there was all working towards something important. And so then we got to the final day, the something important.
That third day was quite like, everyone was sort of like ready to dive into it and to share and to like be somewhat like productively like conflicting and disagree and agree.
Hands up, anyone in this room who is an artist or an arts worker. Keep your hand up if you are tired. If you have been on the cycle of burnout or are on the brink at the moment. That's pretty damning evidence.
And boy, it was a climax like I had not expected. I found that final session, I cried, quite a number of times.
What really matters? Equity, legacy, respect, systems that work, trust, results, making a difference.
In actual reflection, and probably I realised probably the night before, it couldn't have got more high stakes with who was there.
I actually think you need to really look at the way your systems work and how they impact on artists and therefore communities and therefore our culture.
So we had 80 practitioners, we had this incredibly important knowledge circle that were together for the first time, we had our board, and we had our staff, and we had some of our significant stakeholders all in a room.
None of you guys look like Santa Claus, but hopefully he's listening, because what we really want for Christmas is a universal basic income for artists that acknowledges, you know, the value that artists bring to the livability and quality of life in our regional towns and villages.
So we had a plan for the 5th session, and it was to be in a theatre, in a different room. It was to be people presenting on the stage. And as the days were unpacking and unravelling, we were like going, this isn't going to work. This isn't the right way. This isn't the right room. We need to stay in the room. It's not about a present one-to-one. It's not a one-dimensional one exchange. It's much more holistic than that.
And I've tried to deliver this not like a performer. I'm an actor. I can put it on, but I wanted to do it. We wanted to talk about honesty and conversation and just proposition.
I think, you know, the keynote listeners were a really important part of that. And that was, again, about flipping the dynamic and saying, instead of having these 6 industry specialists from these major organisations talk to, it was about them listening and thinking and responding to what the room said.
In the early days of community legal services in Western Australia, for the Aboriginal Legal Service, there was this concept called seagulling, where white lawyers would come into town, make a mess, and leave. Kind of feels like that sometimes from the perspective of the regions. You know, it's not about being there for a couple of days a year, for one show, for one event, for one festival. It's about thinking how we can make this a lifelong journey.
We had a dream, and the sign for dream. We had a vision, and the sign for vision.
I can see a space and hear a voice of our First Nations artists, which has allowed me to raise my own awareness.
What if we did this funding for this more often, connecting community, seeing the progress from our ideas and the networks we've formed?
This is not a utopian vision. This is absolutely within our grasp.
And then there was the moment where he got up and he told us to sit. It was so uncomfortable. First of all, I was really glad I wasn't anyone on the RAA team, because I did not know how to deal with it myself. And I was thinking, how are they managing this? How are they holding this discomfort for us?
Yeah, I think the room. You could feel the room. I could feel the room. I think everyone could feel the room. I have done a lot of reflecting on this, and, you know, at the time was very conscious about making sure, or trying to ensure, that everyone felt safe and everyone was okay in the space.
Would you like mics? Would you like mics?
Yes, thank you. Some of us.
Is everybody okay?
After that.
Yeah.
The way that room held that bit of truth-telling was something quite amazing as well. Like, there isn't many rooms in the world that could sit there quietly and talk through and take in something like that in such a sort of authentic manner.
I found it so challenging, and then I was pleased that it was challenging because it's a topic that should challenge us, but it was so uncomfortable. I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what to think, but I knew this whole room was suspended in this moment of turmoil, really.
So we did do a fair bit of planning, and we did a lot of planning on the day, but actually in going to the risk, most event managers have a run sheet and have a act call, and it's planned A, B, C, D. We had no idea what each group were going to say, how they were going to say it. We didn't know what form they were going to say. We were really clear all the way through that we wanted to hear everyone's voice, and we wanted to have the diversity of voice, and we were also really open to however that voice was to be delivered. We were saying, you can do a slideshow, you can do an interpretive dance, you can do a slam poetry, you can do a song, you can do whatever you want as your vehicle. And again, in hindsight, that openness meant for the fact that we had absolutely no way to know where that was going to go, to time manage it, or to event manage it in any way, shape or form, which is the richness and the challenge. We were very clear about wanting to ensure voice and not say to anyone how that voice was to be delivered. So I think that in that essence, that was actually really quite a success. I think the challenges to that, or where we have some work to do and certainly some thinking to do, is if that voice or if that delivery of a thought therefore affects someone else in a way that they feel unsafe, or is a way that takes them into a space where they don't feel okay to be in the room or to participate, then that's when we need to intervene and to ensure that we're creating a structure or a framework for people to be able to say what they need to say, but no one else is feeling hurt, scared, intimidated, or anything along those lines. If we were to gather people together again, which invariably, people will do, is how we hold space safely. And that means different things for different people. Some people were fine with certain things, some people were not. And it needs to be okay for everybody, and it's how you manage that is the challenge.
How can you plan for that? And no one's right and no one's wrong. It was just a deeply human moment where it's, everything's laid out on the table. Everyone's bare, everyone's raw.
I think for me personally, at the time, it was a really challenging space to be in, feeling responsible for that room, feeling responsible for my team, feeling responsible for all of the facilitators and all the participants, like for the keynote listeners that were really close colleagues, making sure that everyone felt okay through that. And that process after the event was a good couple of weeks of conversations, checking in on people and checking in on how everyone was feeling. So I certainly felt it. I felt very responsible for it. I still feel very responsible for it.
Those conversations need to happen, and there's never really a good time for them. So that they felt like that was a good time for them to share their story and their point of view. And I think the way the room engaged, I can't remember how many people in the room, but it was a lot. Yeah. For 100-something people to just sit quietly and not feel like they have to share or speak over or rebuttal any of it. I think that's both of those parts of that engagement and sharing. It's super, it's kind of amazing and something rare, I think.
Yeah, I will never forget that. I think that will always stay with me, that discomfort. And it's, as I said, that's not a bad thing at all, that to feel that discomfort and ask yourself, why? Why do I feel like that? Wow. But ultimately, you don't get those at economics conferences. What a blessing to be at an arts conference where the real fizz of life happens, and it's raw and it's painful and it hurts, but we grow from those moments.
Wow. Okay, no, it's not what I was expecting. It surpassed any expectation. An event that can take you from tears of joy through to tears of just sorrow, through to excitement and vision, through to just feeling like you're on your knees and shattered, and then back fully round again is pretty extraordinary. We did plan for it, but what we always knew was that we didn't know what we were planning for.
It was pretty awesome to feel heard and seen by these keynote listeners, and I was lucky enough to be chosen to speak in my group, and that was a very powerful moment, being able to speak both as a young person but as a woman as well, and just being in a position that I actually felt like it might have an impact.
How do we make being an artist a future? How do we build capacity in all communities of interest?
Being in a room with so many people that actually do have influence was really important, and I just think every single group had such incredible things to say, and I don't think I've really been in a position, in an environment to explore that before.
With our collective influence, what capacity will be built?
Everyone had such vastly different ideas, but they were all equally impactful and influential and powerful, and that was really incredible, just watching everyone be so passionate about what they were sharing. I actually think probably what my group came up with in regards to our presentation was mainly set around questions and asking questions of these keynote listeners. And our last question ended on, will you respond to my follow-up emails? You don't actually know if it's going to go further, and I think there's a lot of kind of tokenistic things that can be happening where people will just show up and be like, yep, I care about this thing, and move past it. But actually asking these people if they would respond to our emails going forward and, continue fighting for whatever cause we're talking about, I think that was a really important question to ask.
We talked about reframing art as an essential service.
In terms of policies, practices and resources, artists are valued as key workers embedded in all industries.
There will be an increase in artistic and creative offerings for the whole of the community. Non-sports based, non-competitive, inclusive activities for families.
Compulsory regional service for our leading bureaucrats.
RAA has been integral to a process that's only recently happened, and that's reframing the whole way that regional arts practice is understood. It's changing, and I just thought that this is a process that will really move that process along, that understanding of that regional arts practice is special. It just seemed to me that the whole way that Artlands was structured and the way that it was being co-designed was going to develop documentation that would really move that understanding forward.
A large-scale regional arts residency in every state and territory in the country.
Trust artists and honour their practice and acknowledge that artwork, as we keep saying, is a place of not knowing.
It's realising the value of bringing disparate people together in moments where they can be vulnerable and but also can envision something better.
Yeah, we went on a process of making a map because I think a map's a bit more understandable.
How can we disrupt and change the language and change that narrative?
Yeah, and I think that's something the arts does better than anything else. It showcases that breadth and diversity of lived experience within all places, and giving space for that and for communities to then connect with their own voices and champions, that sort of connects that thread better.
Our doctors, our social workers, our dentists, our speech pathologists, our AMBOs, they work their double shifts. They need a dance class on a Saturday morning.
Art has always been, it's so deeply intrinsic to who we are as humans. So serving art is not serving myself or even serving my community. In a way, it's just about connecting to the best of who we can be, but also the most vulnerable that we can be. So I just tap into something bigger, and I think I will always have energy if I'm able to stay anchored to that source. It's not about me, it's something bigger.
We've got artists working in the community, for the community, and the community receiving the benefits of that work.
I think a co-design process is a really good one. I think it comes down to what you want to do. If you want a diversity of voice and you want an open process and you have a vision to say we want to hear from, then yes. If you want to say this is what we do and this is some samples of projects, then no. But if the design of the event has to be true to what you want it to be and what the question is you're asking. I think the ethics of care model is really important, and I think there's a lot of learning that we can do from our Indigenous colleagues in how to do that better. It's not the easy path, but I think it's a really, really important path. And there has to be if you're going to gather, then, back to that quote, it's like, why do we gather and how do we gather well? And I think it has to come back to that. So what's the purpose?
I mean, you can't repeat that every year. It's a special event, but it's given me a different understanding of how gatherings of people can be organised.
Regional practice is alive and well and thriving, and our job is to facilitate that.
We are the creatives. We are the spark in the human condition, the defiant, the spirited, the free. We are the fall guys, the risk takers, the pot stirrers, the ones who have the hard conversations sooner, who address change that needs to be made. We invite all the people to the party, make no evil witches, villains or victims. We thrust forward the forgotten. We see the brightness behind the light. We reach into the cracks, we trace lines and we link paths. We celebrate the stories that seat everyone at the table. We sustain hope, we enable healing, for we are the creatives. We look into the hard places, we bear witness and we see. We capture the lost in language, in creative gestures, redefining what is forgotten as content in life. We are mischief, we are play, we are freedom, we are defiance, and we appeal to the best in all people, and we celebrate the greatness from within. Almost there. Okay, here we go. For we are the creatives, and we are literally fighting for humanity, because we are so much more than consumers and chattels for billionaires. We need another couple of zeros on every budget line. And in closing, Dot said over 45,000 million years ago that art is life, and that's what we do. It's our gig. So thank you, everyone.
First, we ask you to close your eyes and try to imagine a regional world without art. I bet you couldn't, because this requires imagination, which makes it an immediate impossibility.
The amount of data that is collected from acquittals from every project in every state and territory every year that never comes back to the community, that never gets shared. We want to see a national education and awareness raising program that communicates to our community about the role and value of artists, what we bring as a ripple effect, so that we can create a legacy for our children, so that when they see their parents being an artist, it is a viable and desirable pathway.
Basically, we've got lots of detail in here, but you'll see over here is this amazing space. And this space is really important. Did you want to say anything about this, Jessie?
I do. Thank you. And I just want to thank my table for allowing the space.
Thank you.
We just need space.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessie. We do need space.
Incentivised relocation models, so taking the lead from some companies who are actually moving to the country and actually embedding their companies and their practice in regional towns and communities as well.
These guys really wanted me to tell a joke, but I don't do jokes. But I can do this. 5, 6, 7, 8, and just one high kick. Just shaking it out. Thank you.